Exposed. Incredible humiliation of a black worker unveils touching transformation that changed lives. Darrell's heart raced as he walked into the factory that morning. The sounds of machinery blended with the chatter of his coworkers, but all he could hear was the tightening in his chest. He was a proud man, at 32, doing everything he could to lift his family out of poverty. But inside, he grappled with the shadows of racial prejudice and the bullying that seemed to infect every corner of his workplace. His elderly mother, a beacon of faith and resilience, always reminded him, "Don't let them break your spirit, son." But today, those words felt more like a heavy weight than a comforting embrace that he stood there, chest out, wearing the hope of his community like a badge. Kids played outside, laughter echoing from the park nearby, and the rich scent of fried chicken wafted through the air from a neighbor's kitchen. It felt surreal, the juxtaposition of hope existing alongside hardship. Yet, within those factory walls, Darrell often felt described as the black guy instead of his name, and the toxic whispers pierced deeper than any shout of disrespect. Just when Darrell thought he could make it through another day, chaos erupted. A powerful humiliation at work made him feel smaller than ever. His colleagues, emboldened by a culture of acceptance, cornered him at break time. They laughed and pointed like he was a joke, throwing racial slurs that echoed painfully in his ears. The laughter felt like a slap, and Darrell's cheeks burned with shame. The weight of his dreams felt heavier now, an anchor dragging him into despair. His boss, known for a passive attitude, unleashed scorn when Darrell confronted him, revealing a deep-seated prejudice. "You're lucky to be here," he spat, making Darrell's chest tighten as a tidal wave of despair rolled over him. That moment shattered his confidence, leaving him questioning if he could ever achieve the dreams that kept him going. A flicker of independence turned into flickering doubt. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. In the midst of his pain, a light emerged. Family and friends gathered around him, offering the comfort of solidarity. They shared stories, laughter, and tears, their love wrapping around him like a warm blanket. But as they uplifted him, frustration grew in Darrell's heart. He didn't just want comfort, he craved change. Then, everything changed. With fire ignited within him, Darrell resolved, enough is enough. He stepped up, fueled by the pain of injustice he could no longer swallow. As he expressed his outrage, a collective response began to build, where his voice resonated beyond the factory walls. But the question hung overhead: would he emerge victorious from this battle against prejudice? Would his courage spark a wave of healing, or would he face further torment? The air crackled with anticipation as he prepared to confront the culture that suffocated so many. Darrell took a deep breath and felt the weight of the world lift, if only for a moment. The voices of his family echoed in his mind, reminding him of who he was and what he stood for. But the path ahead was uncertain, and he needed more than just hope. He needed a plan. He gathered a few trusted friends after work. They met in a small corner of the park, hidden under the canopy of trees where laughter still danced in the air. "We can't let this continue," he said, his voice steady despite the tremors coursing through him. "It's time to fight back, not with anger, but with a purpose." His friends nodded, sharing in the intensity of his passion. Each of them had faced their own struggles, ignored ideas, belittled dreams, and the weight of stereotypes. Together, they brainstormed ideas on how to confront the toxic culture in the factory. They envisioned a meeting, a chance to collectively speak out against the discrimination that had stifled their potential. They would educate their coworkers, share experiences, and demand respect. The idea started to take shape and gain momentum. With every plan made and every voice raised, Darrell felt a flicker of hope ignite a warmth in his heart. But the reality of their task loomed large. They knew resistance would come, possibly in waves. But fear was no longer an option. This was about more than them, this was about the future of their community. Over the next few days, they put their plans into action. With hand-drawn flyers and an urgent sense of mission, Darrell and his friends spread the word. Stand together, change begins with us. They chanted, voices echoing down the corridors of the factory, capturing the attention of others who had witnessed the same injustices. As the day approached for their meeting, nerves tangled in Darrell's stomach. Would anyone show up? Would he be heard? He caught glimpses of his coworkers in the days leading up to it, and the mixed expressions of confusion, curiosity, and even apathy sent waves of doubt crashing against his determination. Finally, the day arrived. The small conference room at the factory was filled with an unexpected number of people, some faces he recognized, while others were new. Darrell stood at the front, his friends beside him, each sharing stories that interwove emotion and raw truth. The tears flowed freely, turning the room into a sacred space of honesty. But with every tale of pain, there was also a sea of nods and murmurs of understanding. As he spoke about his own experience of humiliation, something remarkable happened. The crowd began to resonate with his words, rising from their seats to share their own battles against prejudice. The time for silence is over. Someone called out of the crowd, galvanizing the room. The energy shifted, resentment transformed into solidarity, and the atmosphere was heavy with unity. As they wrapped up, a chorus of applause filled the air. Darrell felt a swell of pride. This was just the beginning, a seed planted for a new culture in the factory. But outside the safety of that room lurked the reality of resistance. Cold stares and whispered doubts still waited. How far would their courage go? Beyond this moment, would the change they longed for take root, or would the tide of prejudice push back harder than ever? Darrell's heart beat wildly as he faced the uncertain future. He had taken one step, but dozens more lay ahead. How would they navigate the challenges waiting at their doorstep? Darrell stepped out of the conference room, adrenaline still buzzing through him. The applause lingered in his ears, a bittersweet symphony that both thrilled and terrified him. As he walked through the factory floor, the atmosphere was thick. Conversations paused, heads turned, and eyes followed him as if he were a ghost wandering through familiar halls. "Good job, man!" shouted Marcus, one of the newer employees, a spark of enthusiasm in his voice. But just as quickly, Darrell's gaze caught a glare from Tom, a senior worker who had long been a source of ridicule. Tom's expression darkened, warning words unspoken but clear as day. It sent an icy shiver down Darrell's spine. Wasn't he stepping into a new era without opposition? Stick together, he reminded his friends, who clustered around him as they left the room. We need to keep this momentum going. That night, excitement buzzed at the back of his mind, quickly mingling with anxiety. He turned to his partner, Lisa, who understood the weight of these moments. She sat cross-legged on the couch, her laptop buzzing with the glow of an article she was writing. "Do you really think they'll listen?" she asked, looking up at him with concern. Darrell paused. That was the question that ricocheted in his thoughts. Would they stand as allies, or retreat into a comfort zone of silence? He could feel the deep-rooted fear of confrontation gripping many of his coworkers, the risk that came with speaking out against the status quo. He nodded, trying to mask his doubts. "We'll make them listen," he asserted, though uncertainty crept in like a shadow. "We have to keep talking. We can't go back." Over the next few days, he and his friends organized another gathering. This one was aimed not just at the workers but also at management, a chance to bring those in power to the table. They crafted an agenda that included not only testimonies but a call for concrete change, inclusive hiring practices, training for sensitivity and anti-discrimination, accountability measures for those who perpetuated wrongdoing. The day before the meeting, Darrell's heart raced. As he lay in bed, an unsettling thought gnawed at him. What if management dismissed them? What if their courage went unacknowledged? "Damn it, Darrell, you can't let fear win!" he muttered to himself angrily, feeling both fierce and fragile all at once. Just then, a text pinged on his phone. It was from Marcus, buzzing with hope. "We can do this," it read. "We're all counted. Everyone is talking." His mind flickered with warmth. There was strength in numbers, in unity. Just then, Darrell caught sight of something out of the window, a street vendor setting up his cart, boiling corn and steaming hot dogs. Let us meet early, he tapped back to Marcus, and get everyone fired up. The morning of the meeting dawned bright, but the tension in the air lay thick as fog. In the factory's atrium, a small crowd gathered. Faces lit with resolve, they exchanged nervous smiles and whispered affirmations. "Are you ready?" Darrell asked the group. He felt the collective anxiety, but something shifted inside him. This wasn't just about changing minds, it was about breaking chains. As he strode towards the podium, he caught Tom's piercing glare once again, determination mixing with dread. What lay ahead was a battle for respect, and doubts swirled like leaves caught in an autumn breeze. "Here goes nothing," he murmured, feeling the pulse of courage within him. Sweat dripped from his brow as he faced the crowd, but the energy of his friends buoyed him. The stakes were high. Would this be the moment they forged a pathway to change, or would it lead to silence once more? With a deep inhale, he spoke, "Let us start this journey together," but would the factory welcome their voices, or recoil in fear? The tension crackled around him as he began, and he could only hope they were ready to fight for the respect they deserved. Darrell's voice wavered at first, cut through by the nervous chatter of the crowd. He took a deep breath, channeling his fear into something powerful. "We're here today because we believe in change. We want every worker in this factory, regardless of background, to feel valued, heard, and respected." His words rippled through the audience. Some nodded, while others stood with clenched fists, ready to explode with emotion. He glanced nervously at management, their expressions unreadable. Was this going to be a conversation or a confrontation? The divide was palpable, a canyon between those who held the power and those who sought to claim their dignity. "We know this factory can be better. We know it deserves better," he pressed. Inside him, a fire flickered to life as he recalled the stories shared during their planning sessions, tales of mistreatment and silence. Each personal account resonated deeply, fueling his determination. This isn't just about policies, it's about people. The tremor in his voice hardened, and he felt the warmth of support with every word. Just then, he caught a glimpse of Tom crossing his arms, his expression full of disdain. It felt like a weight, a challenge to fold under pressure. But Darrell couldn't back down. "This is our chance to amplify the voices that have been too quiet for far too long. We need to hold the company accountable." A murmur swept through the crowd, igniting the hesitant souls standing on the fringe. They stepped forward, shoulders squared, ready to join the fight. It was as if a wave had washed over them, a surge of courage replacing fear. As he spoke about the necessary changes, more inclusive hiring practices, gender and racial equality, he felt the ground shift beneath him. This was more than a speech, it was a call to arms. Let us build a place where everyone can thrive, where respect isn't just paid lip service but lived out every day. The applause was instantaneous, an eruption of support. Surprised by the power of their response, he felt a rush of emotion, a mix of joy and disbelief, as he saw Lisa's eyes shine with pride from the crowd. Her unwavering belief in him bolstered his resolve. But amid the eruption of support came a moment that froze his heart. Tom stepped forward, cutting through the group like a dark cloud. "You think this is going to change anything? Trust me, you're fighting a losing battle," he spat, his voice steady and chilling. There was a silence that draped itself over the crowd. Darrell felt every pair of eyes shift towards him, waiting for his reaction. Anger churned in his stomach, igniting a fierce protectiveness over his friends and coworkers. "Maybe it will be hard," he replied, voice clear and strong, "but I refuse to let fear dictate our future. We deserve to be heard, Tom. You know it just as much as I do." Around him, heads bobbed in agreement. There was a resolve building, one that he had only dreamed of during their initial brainstorming sessions. Darrell was amazed at the strength of the crowd. It wasn't just his voice anymore. It was a chorus of shared experiences. He pressed further. "If today ends in silence, it won't just be our voices drowned out, it'll be an entire community." Marcus rose, supporting Darrell as he stepped forward, empowered. Let us prove them wrong. Together, we can shape the narrative we've been living. We can make lasting change. Cheers erupted again, filling the atrium as newfound energy pulsed through the air. Each clap and shout made it feel more real. They were no longer alone in this battle. But in the back of his mind, Darrell couldn't shake the danger of what they were doing. Would this rallying cry awaken support, or would it incite backlash from those entrenched in the old ways? As he scanned the crowd, a journey of vulnerability and resistance lay ahead, filled with possibilities and fear. The fight had just begun, and what awaited them beyond this moment remained uncertain. "Are you with us?" he shouted, raising his fist high, the singular question echoing through the factory. A roar of affirmation surged back, but deep. Inside, Darrell couldn't help but wonder what cost would they have to pay for this newfound unity. Darrell's heart thundered in his chest as the crowd's cheers echoed through him. He could feel the energy pulsing, alive and electric. Every cheer was a reminder that they weren't just a group of workers, they were a community standing at a pivotal moment. Yet, even amid the excitement, a cold chill crept into his bones as he remembered Tom's challenge. It loomed over them like a dark cloud, threatening to rain on their parade. When the noise faded slightly, he saw Lisa stepping forward, her bright eyes focused and determined. "We can't let fear paralyze us," she shouted. "Every voice matters. We need to share our stories." Others shifted, glancing around, as if awakening from a daze. Darrell nodded, understanding her urgency. Their stories could be the key to bonding the crowd on a deeper level. "Let us create a space here where everyone can speak," he suggested, looking around the factory atrium. "Who wants to share?" To his surprise, Frances, a quiet woman who typically kept to herself, took a deep breath and stepped into the spotlight. "I've worked here for 10 years, she began, her voice trembling but gaining strength. "In all that time, I was often pushed aside. My contributions? They were ignored." An uncomfortable silence fell, enveloping the crowd. Her honesty hung in the air, tangible. Darrell felt the heat of collective empathy swell. "I've watched countless capable women and men lose opportunities because of where they come from," Frances continued, her voice gaining power. "I fought to be recognized when I should have been celebrated." As her words spilled out, heads turned, and Darrell sensed the crowd leaning in. They had come together not just as workers but as bearers of similar scars, voices that needed to be released. One by one, they began to step forward, sharing stories of struggles and resilience. There was Marcus, recounting how his pay was consistently lower than peers who had less experience. A sense of shame coated his expression, but it became a shared bond. "Why should we have to fight for the recognition we deserve?" he asked, his gaze unwavering as it met the eyes of the management team standing off to the side. The murmur of agreement from the crowd felt like a current rushing through them. There was a shared hunger for better days ahead. Darrell could see it taking shape. Hope was building, thread by thread, story by story. But as the emotional tide surged, Tom's face twisted in frustration at the back. His arms were still crossed, eyes narrowed. Darrell noticed how his presence cast a shadow over the gathering. Doubt flickered in the air, and a sense of injustice filled the room. Then, with a sudden jolt, Tom barked, "This is foolishness. You think airing your dirty laundry will help? All you're doing is weakening your position." The outburst silenced a few voices, but not for long. Darrell's heart raced. He could feel the swell of anger and resilience again. He wouldn't allow Tom to derail this moment. "It's far from foolishness," Darrell echoed, words firing from his lips. "Every story shared strengthens our case. We are a family. We don't hide in shadows. We bring darkness to light." Applause erupted, louder and fiercer than before. Frances beamed at him, eyes filled with gratitude, which only infused Darrell with more fire. As the crowd continued to share and rally, Darrell felt the crushing weight of their collective pain morph into something transformative. Their stories were no longer weapons of division, they were building blocks for unity. This was what change looked like. But even as the atmosphere swelled with hope, a jab of fear lingered. Once they stepped out of this moment, what awaited them? Would they be safe? Let us finish this strong, Marcus called, rallying spirits again. Together, we're unstoppable. Darrell's eyes scanned the weary yet determined faces of his coworkers. They had come alive today, but their journey was just beginning. What battles lay ahead? He raised his fist high, determination coursing through him, and called out, "Are you ready to stand for what's right?" With echoed shouts filling the atrium, he felt the fire reignite. This moment marked the beginning of something profound. The risks were high, but so was their spirit. As they cheered, Darrell couldn't shake the lingering question in his mind: could they truly defy the odds stacked against them? What would happen if the tides turned against them? As the crowd roared and pumped their fists in solidarity, a wave of emotion washed over Darrell. He could see it, their commitment, a shared spirit igniting into a fire that couldn't be snuffed out. Yet, in the pit of his stomach, unease twisted. Tom was still lurking, the malevolence in his stance palpable, and with each cheer, Darrell felt like they were daring fate itself. "Feel that?" Lisa shouted, her voice cutting through the excitement. "That's the energy of change. We can make a difference, but we have to keep pushing." The room resonated with echoes of agreement. Faces started to light up, their vision now collective rather than solitary. Darrell took a moment, scanning the faces, trying to drink it all in, the joy, the determination, and even the flicker of fear that danced in their eyes. But before he could step down from his own moment of passion, Frances stepped up again, this time with a different fire in her eyes. "When I spoke today, it felt like I was freeing a part of myself. But I can't be the only one," she said, voice steadying. "There's a story inside every one of us that deserves to be heard." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, hesitant yet intrigued. Darrell could sense the intensity rising again. He knew this was significant. She was right. They had to let that floodgate open. One after another, stories poured forth. A young worker named Chris spoke about his father's pride when he landed a job here. But how quickly that pride turned to disillusionment when he struggled to make ends meet. Marisol followed with the tale of her late grandmother, who crossed borders for a shot at a better life. Each story ignited the lingering embers of unity. But just as the tide crested, Tom shot back, his voice grating through the air like nails on chalkboard. "You think sharing your sob stories will do anything? This is a business. Stories don't pay the bills." Darrell felt his blood boil. How could one person so completely miss the point? "It's not just about the bills, Tom," he yelled, surprising himself with the raw ferocity in his words. "It's about human dignity. It's about respect." As the words left his mouth, a hush fell. It was a brief silence, thick with tension. Then, almost like a cannonball breaking the surface, Frances defiantly spoke again. "Respect doesn't have a price tag. It's earned." The crowd erupted into applause. Darrell's heart raced, each clap a drumbeat of confirmation. Here they were vulnerable, raw but united in their experiences. Whatever might come next, this moment was crystal clear. They would not be quieted. Just then, a familiar face chimed in, Sarah, the motherly figure in their department. "You want to talk about humiliation, Tom?" "The real humiliation was when I watched my son's dreams crushed because he didn't have the same opportunities as others." With each word, energy vibrated through the air, pushing past Tom's hostility. The crowd surged, willing each tale to fly higher, eager to carry the weight of one another's stories forward. But abruptly, the door behind the management team creaked open. A figure stepped in, a woman in a sharp suit, her presence an immediate and icy counter to their warmth. "Excuse me," she said coolly, drawing eyes away from the pulse of resistance. "I think we need to have a conversation." Darrell's stomach dropped. Who was this woman, and what did she want? He could feel the tension shift, a tight coil of uncertainty wrapping around his heart. The crowd, once so buoyed by hope, now simmered with suspicion. He glanced at Lisa, who looked equally bewildered. Just when they thought their bravery could lead to transformation, darkness loomed again. Were they truly prepared for what was about to unfold? Did they have what it would take to face whatever challenge was about to emerge? The woman stepped forward, her sharp gaze scanning the crowd. "I'm Angela," she introduced herself, her voice measured. And I'm here to represent the board regarding some critical issues. Darrell's heart raced. Representative of the board? She could swing the tide with a single word. The air felt thicker, like a storm about to break. He exchanged a glance with Frances, who gave a slight nod. They were in this together. Please, we're listening, Lisa urged, stepping up, her courage infectious. The crowd seemed to hold its breath. Every face wore a mask of expectation, hungry for answers. We need to address the rumors surrounding layoffs and budget cuts, Angela continued, her tone clinical but somehow devoid of empathy. There's been talk about the need for efficiency and restructuring. Certain departments will be affected. Murmurs rippled through the audience, sharp and anxious. Darrell could see the fear on faces he had come to know the young ones, the parents. He sensed their hopes start to flicker like a dying candle. But we're not just numbers, Frances cried out, cutting through the tension. We're people. We have lives, families, dreams. Angela's gaze softened just a fraction. I understand your concerns, but these decisions are made with the company's longevity in mind. Sometimes, there are losses we have to face for a greater good. Darrell could feel anger bubbling inside him. A greater good for whom? He shot back, the urgency of the moment pressing against the walls of his resolve. You're asking us to bear the burden of your decisions without acknowledging the real-life impact it has on us. Exactly. Chris chimed in, his voice growing stronger. Telling us about efficiency doesn't show you care about the people who work here. We're not just cogs in a machine. Angela's expression hardened again. I'm afraid you're mistaken if you think I don't care. I'm here to deliver a message, not to negotiate. The board has decided we will not entertain any more discussions on these matters. The finality of her words landed like a slap, and hope wavered under the weight of it. Darrell's mind raced, filled with images of his coworkers, people whose stories had already shown so much resilience. What would this mean for them? Stop! He took a bold step forward, adrenaline firing through his veins. You can't just dictate our futures without hearing us. We are a family. We deserve the respect of a conversation, not just a dismissal. The crowd erupted once more, voices rising like a tidal wave. There was strength in unity, and they were not ready to back down. The power struck a chord in the room, shaking the very foundations of complacency. Angela's icy demeanor faltered for a brief moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. I understand your feelings, but I also have my own obligations. Obligations shouldn't silence the voices of those who work hard to keep this place alive, Lisa insisted, her passion unwavering. Darrell felt a shift happening. Each loud affirmation from the crowd began to chip away at Angela's stoic exterior. Maybe all wasn't lost. Maybe if they pushed a little harder, they could at least get her to listen. Just as he found courage in this thought, a loud bang echoed from the back of the room. All heads turned towards the sound, a young man bursting through the doors, breathless and visibly shaken. Guys! He shouted. You won't believe what happened in the break room. The tension in the room seemed to snap, and all eyes were on him, confusion mingling with anticipation. Had something changed out there? Darrell felt a jolt of energy rush through him once again. The battle was not over. Could this unexpected interruption lead to something even greater? With breath held and hearts racing, they braced for whatever revelation lay ahead, a new spark lighting the way in this looming darkness. The young man's face was flushed, excitement and anxiety intertwining in his features. He struggled to catch his breath, eyes darting around the room. Listen! Just a few minutes ago, while we were in the break room, he paused, wiping sweat from his brow. An email came through to everyone. Darrell could feel the anticipation in the air, heavy as lead. The whole crowd leaned in, eager for whatever was about to spill from the young man's lips. This was the kind of news they needed, something concrete that could shift the narrative. They're not just cutting our jobs, he said, his voice trembling slightly. They're also planning to replace some of us with outside contractors. They want to save money by letting people go and bringing in cheaper labor. Disbelief swept through the crowd as gasps echoed around the room. The realization hit like a freight train. It wasn't just layoffs, they were at risk of losing their entire sense of community and loyalty. Darrell could feel the heat rising in him as anger and urgency sparked anew. "They can't do that," Frances exclaimed, heartbreak coloring her words. "This isn't just about jobs, it's about trust. We've built something here." Angela's stoic front began to crack under the weight of incredulity. "That's not how the board operates," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "It's not personal, it's business." "Exactly," shouted Chris, emboldened by the reactions from his peers. "And the more you treat us like numbers, the more you'll push us to fight back. We will not stand by as you dismantle our lives." The young man, still shaking slightly, seemed to draw strength from the crowd. "I know some people immediately signed a petition for transparency," he continued, "and the break room is now filled with chatter. People are outraged. They want to fight." A chorus of voices erupted, demanding action, wanting to turn their fear into something tangible. Hope surged among them, amplifying the fervor. All of this brewing energy could be transformed into a movement. Darrell's heart raced. This was the moment. This was the chance not only to protect their jobs but to show the board how strong their unity could be. Looking around, he saw fears shifting into anger, and anger blossoming into collective purpose. "Let us organize," Darrell called out, his voice rising above the chaos, seeing the real fire in the eyes of his coworkers. "Let us bring everyone together, make our voices unignorable. This isn't just about pacing our steps, this is about standing firm together." The crowd erupted into cheers, faces lit with fervor and determination. They were no longer a collection of individuals, they were a team, a coalition ready to fight against what felt like an impending storm. They could sense the shifts that had begun. The fear was replaced by empowerment. Angela took a measured breath, trying to regain control, but her presence felt smaller, less imposing amidst the rising tide of resistance. "You misunderstand the rules of engagement," she said, a note of frustration creeping into her voice. Darrell shook his head firmly. "No, Angela. We're not asking for understanding anymore. We deserve our place, our jobs, and our voices to be counted." With a deep inhale, Darrell felt a surge of courage. They would not go quietly. They would rally every worker, every voice, to stand against the board's indifference. And then, just as they began to gather their ideas and movements, a clatter swept through again. A figure emerged, someone Darrell didn't expect. It was one of the board members, slipping through the doors with grave urgency. A few whispering silences followed, uncertain eyes locked on him. What was he doing here? Was this another tactic to silence them, or could this be another twist in their unfolding drama? As the room hushed in anticipation, Darrell held his breath, his heart beating with hope and dread. Would they finally hear the collective heartbeat of their community? What would this unexpected confrontation bring? The board member, a tall man with sharp features and an air of authority, stepped into the circle of buzzing voices. His presence commanded immediate attention, but the energy in the room was electric with defiance. Darrell could feel everyone's eyes darting between him and the newcomer, their fears still mingling with the hope they had found. "Let me speak," the board member said, raising his hands to quell the murmurs. The crowd stilled, tension coiling tightly in the air. It was a moment of reckoning, a deep breath before they plunged into uncharted waters. His gaze swept the room, settling briefly on Darrell, who stood tall, absorbing the gravity of the situation. "I understand this news has rattled you," he began, his voice steady, almost soothing. "But I assure you, this is not a decision we take lightly. There's a broader strategy at play here." A ripple of incredulity passed through the crowd. The board member seemed to sense it, and he faltered for a brief moment. "We're looking at the future of the company," he continued, his words careful, almost rehearsed. "Outsourcing is part of our vision, to remain competitive in this market. We've seen companies thrive by adopting this model. Thrive at whose expense?" Frances cut in, her voice trembling with intensity. "We're not being consulted. We're being discarded. You're choosing profit over people." The board member's jaw tightened, but Darrell noticed a flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps remorse or recognition of their struggle. I'm here to listen, he said, his tone softening. But a decision is coming, and we cannot ignore the realities of the industry. Darrell felt a swell of urgency. This was their chance. You think we're just numbers? He called out, emboldened. These are our lives you're talking about. We may not have the same power as the board, but we are ready to come together for what we believe in. We want transparency, not secrecy. A wave of affirmation rippled through the crowd, voices rallying behind him. The intimacy and unity they'd forged in moments of hardship suddenly felt impenetrable. They weren't just workers, they were human beings who had poured their time, sweat, and dreams into this place. Maybe you're right, the board member replied, a hint of vulnerability creeping into his words. I can't pretend that this isn't a tough conversation. But change is messy, and sometimes it demands sacrifices. But it shouldn't cost us our dignity. Chris shouted, fists clenched with determination. The board member shifted on his feet, his facade cracking under the mounting pressure of their collective resolve. In that brief moment, the silence broke the tension, exposing an emotional pivot, the realization that they were all tangled together in this fight, whether they liked it or not. Let us set a meeting, he said finally, looking over his shoulder as if preparing an escape. Let us discuss your concerns more formally. I can't make promises, but I can hear you out. As murmurs of disbelief mixed with hope ignited around him, Darrell's heart raced. This was it. They had sparked a conversation, a potential opening to expose the vulnerable underbelly of their situation. Just then, the board member reached for the door. I'll have my assistant schedule it, he called back, his voice fading as he slipped away, leaving the workers buzzing. What just happened? Angela's voice broke through the chatter. Did he really agree to that? Darrell met her gaze, and for the first time, something unyielding flickered in her eyes. He seems more vulnerable than I thought, he said cautiously. Maybe we can turn this around. But doubt lingered. Would they truly be heard, or was this just another hollow promise? As the group began to disperse, a weight hung in the air. Fear and the fire of injustice mingled into an uncertain resolve. What would be their next step? For Darrell, the determination to protect their community had never felt so palpable. Yet, the real question gnawed at him. Would their unity hold, or would the board's insensitivity snuff out this ember of hope, leaving their dreams in the ashes? Days turned into weeks, and the anticipation hung over the factory like a thick fog. Darrell felt the pressure build within him as they prepared for the meeting with management. Each day at work was tinged with anxiety, but together, they remained steadfast and resolute. The moment finally arrived. The small conference room buzzed with a mix of excitement and nerves. Darrell looked around, seeing familiar faces lit by determination, his friends, coworkers, the community he had fought so hard to uplift. Each heart beat as one. As management entered, a hush fell over the room. Darrell recalled their previous encounter, the anger, the defiance. This was their chance to turn the tide for everyone. He could feel the heat radiate from his friends. They were ready to hold the line. Thank you for agreeing to meet us, Darrell said, his voice steady, a touch of steel woven through. We appreciate the opportunity to share our concerns, as well as our hopes for the future of this company. He could see Angela observing closely, accessing their strength, taking notes. I was taken aback by the last meeting. It felt as if our voices didn't matter, Frances chimed in, her gaze focused yet respectful. But we're here to change that perception. Heads nodded in agreement. It wasn't just about currency on a balance sheet, it was about lives lived and sacrifices made. Each story shared was a testament to their collective journey. Piece by piece, the narratives unfurled, filled with grief, resilience, and ultimately, hope. One by one, they spoke. Chris's story echoed in the room, carrying the weight of sacrifice and dreams deferred. I want to be proud of where I work, but right now, it feels as if our contributions mean nothing, he declared, his voice resolute. Angela shifted, her demeanor softening, and for the first time, she diverted her gaze from her notes to look directly at them. The energy shifted. Something was breaking. Listening is the first step, Darrell added. We're not here to fight, but to build. By bringing in voices from the community, people from every corner, we can create a culture that truly represents everyone. The air thickened with intensity. Questions filled the room, echoing back and forth, each one adding another layer to the commitment they were forging. Many felt uneasy, but this was a necessity. Conversations turned passionate as Darrell and his friends firmly, yet respectfully, drew connections between respect, accountability, and the future of their workplace. I urge you to consider, Lisa said, her voice strong, that what benefits us raises the entire factory. When we feel valued, we work harder and smarter. Our pride enhances productivity. The board members exchanged unsure glances, but then the board member who had spoken before leaned forward, impressed. I understand there's been a lot of pain here. We truly want to look at policies, and that starts now. The crowd erupted with emotions, but Darrell held up his hand, keeping the momentum alive. But we need a timeline, we need commitment. Real changes take time, but we need to see our voices represented within it. We'll help you, but you have to start walking with us. Days melded into weeks again, but every small triumph felt monumental. The board agreed to steps towards transformative strategies for hiring, sensitivity training, and making this much more than just an agreement. It was a collective journey, a commitment to using every ounce of strength they had. The meeting left them feeling empowered. Outside, a fresh spring breeze greeted them, carrying the laughter of children playing nearby. Hope blossomed. It colored their interactions, resonating warmth where fear and doubt had once prevailed. Darrell's transformation was crucial. He felt lighter, free from the weight of silence. He had stepped into his truth, and now, he'd ignited a fire within his community. His colleagues stepped into this light alongside him. Every day became a new chance to make an impact. As they walked past the factory gates, each face mirrored joy and pride. The journey took courage, but together they had forged a path of respect. Darrell felt a swell of gratitude wash over him. He was no longer just Darrell of the factory. He was a symbol of change, hope, and community. Now, on this hopeful horizon, they could breathe free. Make sure this moment resonates with you. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, and keep our movement alive. Comment your reactions and feelings about this ending. You've got to share how these voices inspired you. And please share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. You need to subscribe now, because this is the moment to show your support for truly uplifting stories. Don't wait not even one more second to share.